Hello and welcome back to my devlog of the game I'm making, Verse. And, we'll answer the question of the title of this video straight away. What makes a game a game? Hubris. Naivety. And then, above all, perseverance in the face of those two things. Like, I had a rough time implementing something recently, but we're just going to dive straight into gameplay and take a look. So I have to cargo run release, why not? We'll run the release version, and you'll get a chance to see where we're at. So, there it is. Verse. Press start. We can skip over to the credits. I've made a change here too. So now the credits will scroll. I do need to mess about with the timing a little bit so that shows up a bit quicker. But, there they are. And this is just adjusting we might see this value later. It's adjusting the top value of the element. And it's just scrolling up. This means I'll be able to fit more in eventually. And that's great, but we'll dive into the game. I do need to now deal with some nuisances. Where are they at? Where are they at? Come on now. There you are. Get out of here, man. Okay, yeah. So you can see we've got a little bit of gameplay, a little bit of Come back here. Did I get you? I got you. So next one. There are 6 of these in total. I'm not yet spawning them on the fly or anything. So once I get rid of the 6 of these, we can take a look around the solar system, which I've made some changes to too. Oh, one of them you can already see. I've changed this sun, so it's a bit more like Sol. It's a bit more like our own sun. It also has stronger gravity now. If I let go of the controls, I'll be drawn to it really quickly and eventually settle near the center. There's no damage or anything. There's nothing, well, from the stars anyway. I have taken oh, look at that. Yeah, so I'm trying to get away now, and it's taking a very long time because of the strength of the sun's gravity. It's actually capped out. I actually had to limit it to 9,000. It can't go over 9,000. Because if it did, you'd really be unable to escape it. In fact, yeah, these are all... There's Earth. Yes, I've remodeled the solar system a little bit, so this is Earth. This was already here, actually. But if we keep going this way, we'll bump into what is now pretending to be Mars, and the other planets are all Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Here is, in fact, Mars. Mars's gravity is weaker than Earth's and is weaker than the Sun's, of course, so you can see I'm just floating past it, but I am being drawn towards it gradually, but I have no problem escaping from Mars's gravity, nor Earth's, nor any other bodies really, apart from the Sun's. The Sun has the strongest gravity by far. Jupiter does have a strong gravity, but it's not too much of a problem to get away from it. I didn't want the planets to be, too limiting, but I think if you are flying around near a star, it should be a bit more of a challenge. And eventually a black hole, depending on the engines you've got installed, which is not really a concern of the game yet, but depending on the engines you've got installed, a black hole should be much more difficult to escape than, say, a star would be. But here's Jupiter. It's got some pretty strong gravity again. And yeah, the animation, had to slow that down a bit. It's maybe still a bit too fast. The animation for Saturn in particular is too much. Obviously, you don't know where each of the planets is. I only know this because I've been flying around my solar system enough that I know Saturn is this one over here in this direction. South of Jupiter on the screen is just Neptune at the moment, and Uranus, Mercury, Venus, etc. They're all to the north. The Mercury moves so fast in its orbit at the moment that it does complete a loop. I think within a minute. Might be a bit longer than that. But Saturn is, I think, the one that I'm the least happy with at the moment. If we ever get there. I think the scale of the solar system is really... It's very tiny. Very, very tiny. But it feels right for the kind of arcadey sense that I'm going for at the moment. There it is, Saturn. I think the animation is maybe a bit too fast. It does a good job. It does a good job. I should show you how I made these. That's worth a look, isn't it? Because it wasn't... It's not my art. It's from Pixel Planets. Pixel Planets. Pixel Planets? Yeah, Pixel Planets. By Deepfold. Deepfold. That should find it. There we go. So it's on itch.io. It's a little planet generator by Deepfold. There you can see an Earth-like planet, Terran wet. You can see Terran dry is the Mars-like texture that I used. Texture? No, sprite sheet. You can get one that's got islands and change it up a bit until you get one that you really like. No atmosphere is what I'm using for Mercury at the moment. You've already seen me using that one because it was the placeholder for all the planets previously. Gas Giant is what I'm using for Jupiter. Gas Giant 2 is what I'm using for Saturn. I did have to change the colors a bit, but you can, mess with these very specifically to your liking. Ice World there. Lava World, I'm actually using this for Venus. See, that looks sort of appropriate for Venus. We can change the colors. I'd say reset that and then go random. You can see, yeah, the little orange pockets are supposed to be the lava, and then the rest of the body is supposed to be like an atmosphereless surface. So it's not really appropriate for Venus. But if you get, oh no, not that. Random. If you get something that's got like a huge amount of lava, then I think it does a good job of like replicating what Venus ought to kind of look like. Though eventually, I don't think I'm going to use Pixel Planet Generator. I'm going to use, for example, you can export sprite sheets. All of the animations that I've got are 125 frames. But eventually we won't be using that because we need to generate our own planets. And also, they need to have like planetary landings and shit too. But anyway, hubris, naivety. That combat you've just seen, man, combat was a pain to do. If we go to ships and oh god, it's all over the place. It is well organized, yeah. But okay, we've got the ship module. We now have player and enemy modules as separate. Yeah, let's just take a look at an older commit, shall we? We should, yeah. That's why I've got this open in the first place. If I take this, and you saw me last time checking out versioned releases, tags. This time I'm just going to check out a commit. A commit is sort of the thing that's in between releases. Every time you save something and then commit it into Git, save it into Git, you're creating a commit with a SHA like this, so you can always go back and check anything out at any time. Go back to, it says here, yeah, head detached at 7cc3765, that's the SHA of this particular commit. And if we cargo run at this point, it's gonna take a minute. So let's jump over to the code. Enemy doesn't exist, ship doesn't exist, main still does, but back in the player system, still called player system, should be called ship now. Back in ship, we do we have an enemy? We do, yeah, I've created an enemy component at this point. There is some changes down here to the ship flight system. Yeah, we're querying for the player now instead of the old ship component we were, because the ship is now, well, enemies also have ships. So it didn't make sense to keep using this as just the player component, which is why I've introduced these. And these are just marker components. They don't have like attributes like these do. Marker components are, you can see it's used here when I'm spawning the player entity. There's the marker component and there's the ship component with attributes. Marker components are just a way for querying, really. It's like if it's a special kind of thing, like a player versus an enemy, but it doesn't have any different attributes. Like they both have, ship speed and ship rotational values. You can just create a marker component and use that to query them. So I am getting the ship and the player with player there. So making sure that the ship flight system is only working for the player. A few other changes at this point in time as well. How close are you? Okay, pretty close. Yeah, at this point in time, there was a few other changes. Oh yeah, to speedometer, to the nav. What we're looking at, by the way, is a diff view. I can get split mode, which might be a bit clearer. And if we go down to dynamic orbit now at this point applies to both the ship and the player ship and the enemy. So the enemy will be drawn in due to gravity, just like the player is. The ship module, yeah, as I say, we're just looking at that. We added the player and enemy components to like make those distinct. Added a new enemy ship spawning, which is basically all the same as the player ship spawning, apart from that it's got the enemy marker instead. And then the ship flight system had a minor change, but okay. Here's the game. And it's a little bit bigger. At this point, I haven't got weapons system. I'm trying to fire, but there's no... And there's one of the ship... Well, there's the only ship, in fact. We'll just follow you. You are affected by gravity, right? Yes, well, you must be, because that's how you were attracted to the sun in the first place. And are attracted back to it. And I can just sort of follow you around. The sun's gravity is so weak at this point, but you can see the enemy is just a sprite that spawned in, being affected by gravity. We get this collision, by the way. This collision was a surprise to me. That's just a bonus. That was like already set up. Because both the enemy and the player have got rigid body dynamic and collider. They have a collider with certain mass properties and whatnot. But the collider from the physics system I'm using, Rapier 2D, that's just giving us that for free. That was already there. Didn't have to do any special programming for that or anything. It does, in the game as it is, mean that because the AI is so basic at the moment, the enemy wants to it wants to match your position exactly. So it will turn and face towards you, then fly into you, and just if it's like pointing towards you and directly hitting you, it'll keep pushing you, trying to occupy your space just indefinitely, all the while firing at you and destroying you. But what we were looking at just a moment ago was these changes to camera. For example, the camera follows the player. So we've now changed this from using ship to using player in all instances, because it doesn't need to follow the enemies, it needs to follow the player. Same for the indicator system. That's what shows the player position relative to other bodies in the solar system. So that's all here. That's changed to player as well. And same for the nav there. There is another commit I wanted to look at. Another particular... but we're going to dive over to... I've got a couple of versions open here, yeah. Version 0016 comes after this commit. And this is the first iteration with the enemies. So I wonder... Yeah, there's this... Okay. It has 6 enemies again. You can't see damage appearing on screen, but there they go. They are doing damage, by the way. If you look down at the left bottom corner, I have 7,500 HP now. Should be 10,000, but they've taken some... Oh, God. Yeah, okay. As I say, there are 6 of them. I haven't worked on, spawning them at random yet or anything like that, but... come on. Oh, you dick. Come on. We don't need to do this. At this point, the sun is still the old sprite sheet. The Earth is still the same sprite sheet, and all of the other planets are just using that Mercury texture. I talked about the sort of no atmosphere one. So we don't need to really fly out to one because we've already seen them. Near Rocky Planet 2. Maybe we get there and you just see. Rocky Planet 2 should be Venus. And of course, when we get there, it looks nothing like Venus. It looks more like a moon. And it's in fact using the same texture that I will eventually be using for Mercury in the game as it stands right now. Go away. Anyway, we'll close there. That was the first iteration with sort of combat, and man, that was a pain to do. So that was version, what, 0.0.16? We'll check that out. Whoops, there is no such thing. Because I missed a decimal point. Not a decimal point, sorry, just a period. Yeah, we'll go over to, what's the state of stuff at this point? Yeah, bullet system. So dynamic orbit, as I say, applies to both ships. That's why the ship, even before combat was implemented, the enemy ship was affected by gravity and bumping into the player ship. We now separate things out. So the player and enemy components aren't in here, they're in here. Yeah, there's the player in the player.rs file, and enemy is in the enemy.rs file with its own sort of, oh yeah, targeting system. That's interesting. It's mainly this that was such a pain, and why I talk about hubris. I mentioned hubris and naivety at the beginning, because I thought AI is going to be so easy to implement, right? Because I'm just gonna borrow from this crate, this big brain crate by, here we go, Zcat. Yeah, big brain. It's an AI module. It lets you define complex, intricate AI behaviors for your entities based on their perception of the world. I thought, okay, we'll implement big brain, and they'll have certain behaviors. You know, if they're a distance from the player, then we'll say, okay, fly towards the player. It'll be that easy. No, it's not that easy. It's not that easy at all. But as I say, yes, hubris, naivety. And then I didn't end up using big brain in the end. So where are we? Oh yeah, we've got this targeting module. I'll have to talk about that, which is setting a position and an angle. If we go down, eventually, not eventually, sorry, the opposite of eventually. prior to having this enemy targeting system, this was actually written in two separate places. I had this here in the enemy flight system at the beginning, and I had it here in the enemy weapon system at the beginning. But obviously, if you're repeating code like that, you want to find a way to reduce repetition. So that's what I did with the enemy targeting system, which, let's go through this. It gets the commands thing, which is a Bevy specific thing for doing, commands.entity.entity.insert. We are inserting the targeting component into the entity that we found, which is just the enemy entities. For each enemy entity, in fact, this is this itamut here is saying for each of these that we find an enemy entity with transform and entity, we want to insert the targeting component with the values position, target.translation, and angle steering. So the target.translation, where's target? Target is let OK target, right? So again, target first of all is the player.getSingle. So we find the player in the world, and since that target there is just the player transform, we get the translation of the transform, which is just its position in space, and we set that as the position for the targeting. So now the enemy sort of has a brain, it sort of has a memory. It's like, I know where the player is, and that's where I'm going. Well, this doesn't say that's where I'm going, it's just being aware of where it wants to get to. So that is the player position and player, the angle as well. Yeah, the angle, it's interesting. So once we've got the target position, we have to get the desired velocity, which is sort of, if there are two angles, we'll go over here. We'll find something that sort of illustrates this so well. It's steering behaviors, essentially. If I find, steering behaviors, seek already implemented here. This is what implements it. This is the code we're looking at the moment, essentially. But yeah, if we go here to steering behaviors, this is what it's trying to do. So is there an image? Is there a good image? Yeah, here we go. So the desired velocity is this velocity here towards the target. If you imagine, say, the enemy is facing in this green direction, then it wants to go towards the player instead. It needs to have a steering value sort of added to its current velocity to make it start to travel towards its desired velocity. This makes it sort of essentially draw an arc rather than just immediately snap to the new position. So you can see the seek path works a bit like that. And the way I'm implementing that is a bit different to here, because this was written ages ago. This was written for ActionScript, Flash. And Flash is, of course, a dead technology now, I think. So yeah, we get the desired velocity, which is just the sort of the position of the player-ish. No, it's the direction towards the player. That's all that is. We normalize or zero it, in fact. So it's just the XY direction as like 1, 1, rather than like the magnitude of the direction as well. We're just getting the direction in this case. And then for the steering, we take the desired velocity. We get the angle between it and the transform. Local Y. Oh, what does local Y do? It just says it's a vec3. But seriously though, what does it do? Get the unit vector in the local Y direction. Okay. Oh, local Y, that's, okay. The reason there's a local Y there is because, and this is what took me so long to figure out. This is why I talk about hubris. I thought it was going to be simple, but this was really tricky and really like fiddly. Like, it doesn't look like a lot of code, does it? But it was really tricky and fiddly to like work out exactly what to do. There was points where the enemy behavior, it was completely incorrect. It was going the other way, or it was behaving as if it's like its rear facing direction was towards the player. So it was trying to, every time it was trying to thrust away from the player. The reason for that is, we go to, it's in space, right? Ships? Yeah. You can see the enemy sprite. The reason we need the local Y is because it's oriented this way. I think if the sprite were rotated this way, we'd want the local X. And if it were oriented the other way, facing that way, we'd want negative X. Or, you know, facing down, we want negative Y. I believe that's the reason we get this value here. We want to get the angle from its current facing direction to the desired velocity and then turn it appropriately using this steering angle here, which we of course set on the targeting. And as I say, this was originally in the code here and also down here, but repetition, we get rid of that. So now instead, the enemy flight system has targeting as part of its query for the enemy ship with enemy. We get the targeting from it, and that's used here. We get the desired velocity again. Do we really need to be doing that? Hang on. We've already got steering, right? Targeting to angle. Ooh, you know what? Yes, we need the desired velocity because it's used here. Okay, yeah, we do. Fair enough then. Yeah, so maybe that should be stored on it as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, we get the desired velocity and the steering from here, and this is of course the what module? Flight system. So this is trying to direct itself and fly towards the player. So we're using roughly the same sort of logic that we do for the player ship here as well. If we go down to the player steering system, the player flight system, you can see it's very similar. We have if action state pressed forward. That's if you press the up arrow or the W button, or you using your controller, you use the that's R2 or the right trigger on your controller. Then it will add a thrust factor of 1.0. If you rotate, etc., blah de blah. Same sort of thing happening here, but in this case, it's if steering is greater than negative 0.1, we add this rotation factor. If steering is less than 0.1, we add this rotation factor in the other direction. So given a steering value, which I believe is anywhere between 0 and... it's not 0 and tau. No, I think it's actually between negative pi and positive pi. So yeah, if it has anywhere between negative 0.1 and negative pi, then it will rotate counterclockwise. And if it has a value between 0.1 and positive pi, then it will rotate clockwise. And this rotation factor is then used in this ship rotation module, which is back on ship, because it's the same logic used. Where's ship rotation? There it is. Same logic used. We just take the rotation factor in, as well as the velocity of the body. Is that right? Do we pass you the velocity? Yep. And the ship itself. So you take the velocity of the ship, which is not just its sort of facing direction, its linear velocity, it's also its angular velocity, which is what we're interested in here. Angvel. Angular velocity is the amount that it's spinning. And we take the rotation factor, which is 1.0, right? Is its max? Yeah. We just add 1.0 or negative 1.0, and whatever the case may be. We apply that rotation factor to the ship.rotation divided by 60. Now that should actually be... That's wrong. I think that needs to be... This is my crude attempt to make it sort of limit itself based on time, based on frame rate. So this should probably be delta seconds or something like that instead. Yeah, that should probably be delta seconds, but we won't bother fixing that right now. Delta time is still one thing that I need to make major changes to. But as I say, this was really complicated. This was difficult to get right. And the weapon system also implemented at this point. We have, oh yeah, the event system. God, that was a pain too. But essentially, once again, we're getting targeting, and so we get the steering, targeting angle, and for the steering, we want the absolute value of the steering. So the absolute value is, if it's a negative, make it positive, essentially, right? And if that's less than 0.1, meaning the player is almost directly in front of, or directly in front of the enemy ship, then it will start firing bullets, given that it is in this distance, 400 frames. And this turned out to be, I'd say, pretty decent fake behavior. We don't need to run it here. We can go over to 16, actually. Like, the behavior for that, we'll see again. It's not bad. They turn towards us. They try and fly towards us. If I get out of range, they'll stop firing. And if... oh, there they are. If they're not facing me, they won't fire either. So it really, with very basic, simple rules, already looks kind of like they know what they're doing. Though if we can get a head-on collision, anyone want to crash into me? Yeah, see that? Just crashes into, and then... So we need some avoidance behavior eventually. I still haven't implemented that, but... I'd say it's pretty good. And in particular, once we get to 0017, I think this is where I have the gravity changed, and I have the new sprites. Yeah, we've changed position. So we're south of the star now. And the reason I did that is because the strength of the gravity... Oh, shit. The strength of the gravity is so high. Yeah. Goddamn. You can see how much more of a challenge the gravity makes it, but also it makes their motion feel a little bit more dynamic as well, the motion of the enemy ships. They're crazy. They will, no matter how far away in space they are from the player, just turn towards and make a beeline for the player. No matter where. Like, they could be millions of pixels away. They could be billions of pixels away, and they would just attempt to orient and direct themselves towards the player ship. But yeah, so 0017, not much to look at there, I don't think. There is another thing I wanted to check out, but I'm struggling to find. No, of course it's back on. It's back on here, where we were looking at steering behaviors. As you can see, I still have a lot more to implement. The main one I'm interested in is collision avoidance, because that will, if they're going to collide with the player, we want them to turn away from, hopefully without interfering with their actually being decent to fight, decent combat-wise. So we want them to be able to avoid the player as well. But we'll get there. As I say, I'm using that as a guide, very old guide, but very, very useful, very informative. We want 017, this other commit, yeah. This other commit, should we check? No, we won't check this out. This comes sometime after 0016. I think this comes after 0017, actually. So this isn't released yet. This isn't released. This is the game as we were playing it when I started. So we'll check out. I want to go back to main here, please. Main, thank you. And that's the state of the game as it is currently. We're back on, back on the live, up-to-date version of the game. The reason in particular I wanted to show this is despawn UI damage after half a second. Okay. Oh yeah, it's because I added that damage module, didn't I? If I ask you to run the release version, will you do that nice and quick? Because there are no changes? Or will you not? If you're going to take forever, I'm not going to do it. 408 out of 409? Okay, that might be nice and quick. But you saw at the beginning of this video when I was showing it off, when you hit an enemy now, a little damage text value appears. It's always 100, which is written despawn time. I forget that. Not on bullet. Where is it? Damage to RS. Yeah, we'll open that up in the code editor. In fact, so damage to RS, please. So yeah, you can see it here. We spawn a bit of text with 100 using the regular font, using red text, and what that does is it appears. Actually, you know what? I've got a screenshot on my Discord of what it did look like. So if I jump over to Discord real quick and open this, just scroll up to here. So this is what that looked like. Okay, never mind. The game has spawned, so I can show you exactly what I mean. You'll see. We'll take a look at that in 1 second. You'll see that when we start hitting an enemy, yep, there we go. The text now disappears. It now fades away. It now actually moves up a few pixels as well when you hit an enemy, and then disappears. This is what it looked like at the first implementation. I had no logic to dictate how it should disappear ever, so it stayed on screen. I had no logic to dictate that it should fade away, and nothing told it to move, so it stayed exactly where it spawned on the screen. I thought this was going to be difficult. This was actually really easy to do, which is why in my Discord I say new damage UI working as intended, but like not even sarcastically. I cobbled together some code, was surprised this worked first try. Genuinely, because this was so simple to initially do. We have the UI spawn damage system, and all that I needed to do for it really was get the bullet ship contact events, which we haven't talked about yet, but I had already done this event system. So whenever a bullet hits a ship, it creates a bullet ship contact event. And so for every bullet ship contact event that we find, we iterate over those, and we just say, okay, we're going to get the ship transform that we've just hit from the event, whatever the ship is that we've just hit. We want to know where in space that was. So we get that. And then we set the position of the thing to coordinates y and coordinates x of this value here. I thought it was going to be so difficult to take the enemy position and convert it into a position in the UI because they use completely different coordinate systems. But what Bevy provides is this world to viewport. So if we have the camera, which is why I have to get the camera as well, we get the camera specifically to get its just the camera itself and the global transform. If we take the camera and we say world to viewport, and then we give it the transform of the camera, which is always where it is in space relative to the player, and then we give it the translation of the ship that we just hit, it will convert this value into the on-screen coordinates, which is just, like I say, it worked first time. I thought I was going to have such a pain doing this. I thought I was going to have like the easiest time in the world doing the enemy AI, and I didn't. And I thought I was going to have the hardest time in the world doing this, just because like anything UI related in Bevy right now is kind of complicated. But this just worked first try. And then this was pretty quick to implement as well, the UI text fade out system. It just takes the time as a resource, and that's applied as delta seconds to the top, which we're shifting up. And so we're moving it up screen a little bit, and this is the bit that handles the fade out here. So we just change the alpha for every tick until it disappears, and it does disappear on a despawn timer, which is why I have this open, in fact, isn't it? Yeah, because I did some on-the-fly refactoring here, because I'd already done some of this. Yeah, there's the damage system, so we don't want to concern ourselves with the damage system. This is the bullet system, where we actually got rid of the bullets despawn system here, because I realized the code I was going to be using to despawn the UI text was going to be the exact same. We're just getting the entity and saying once the timer's done, which is this here, 2.0 seconds for a bullet, or down here 0.5 seconds for the UI text. Once the timer's done, we're just saying, okay, now remove it from the world. If the timer is finished, remove it from the world. So this got moved from here, and this is refactoring, so we're never repeating ourselves in the code, we're always reusing code. I added a new module just to the core resources, because I like to keep my stuff as organized as possible. This is going to change, though. I think it's not as organized as it could be right now. But yeah, core, resources, despawn timer. We moved that system here. It's just a despawn system now. It's not a despawn bullet system. It's not a despawn UI text system. It's just the despawn system that for anything that has a despawn timer, we iterate the timer. Yeah. Every tick of the clock, we iterate the timer by 1. And if it's finished, that is if the timer has like run out and hit its, its specific value it wants to, whether that be half a second or 2 seconds, we at that point despawn the entity. And that works for the bullets. It works for the UI text as well. So reusing the system, very good idea. Means we don't have like similar code scattered all over the place. There's probably a lot more of this that I could do, and I will do. There'll be lots of refactoring to do. Like, I know it's been only just over a week since the last devlog. I'm not going to do them this frequently all the time, because a lot of the time there's going to be more to do. There's going to be more challenges. There's going to be lots of refactoring, which is a pain in the ass. But actually, I like refactoring. I like organizing it so that I know where everything is. And so that is the tale. That is the tale of hubris and naivety and overcoming it. Because that's really all you've got to do is you'll think something's going to be easy, and it won't be. That's a repetitive cycle in any kind of development, really, but game dev in particular, it seems. You'll think something's going to be easy, and it won't be. But you'll break it down into parts and implement it little by little, and eventually you'll get there, and it'll be done. And then you move on to the next thing, and it'll either be mega easy unexpectedly, or it won't. And you continue from there. I think that's everything I wanted to show today. But I do want to say, to answer the question again with a different answer, what makes a game a game? The answer is gameplay, which we now have. And another reason you might think I'm hubristic and naive is because I said I wanted to make a space adventure RPG on a galactic scale, which I still do. That's still what Verse is going to be eventually. But this is almost a game already. And since before I began working on Verse, I knew I wanted to break it into like at least 3 stages, and they were going to be space exploration. They were going to be space exploration, and then like doing ship interiors, living quarters, that sort of thing, so you could live on your ship and interact with things inside of it. And then also planetary exploration. That's like the last big thing on the list. And I think it's last because I think it's going to be the most challenging to do. But the idea was always to do it like in at least those 3 stages, so that I get to finish a game quicker. The idea was to make a finished game, and I think those stages get separated even more, because at this point we're almost at the point where we have a nice little arcade shooter. We have gameplay. What we don't have is a gameplay loop. It just ends. We're just now floating in space. No enemies left. We don't have a gameplay loop. We don't have increasing challenge. And we don't really reward the player. I mean, there is a sense in which like the UI text that I've added is kind of rewarding. It did make a huge difference to like how I felt about the game when I added it. So when I hit the enemies now, you know, you see that text appear. You get a more tangible sense that you've hit them and that you've done damage, which feels a bit more rewarding. But I'm talking more like the player should get points and a high score, and then a save system. I have a 0.1 track, in fact, back over on my GitHub for Verse. If we go there and we check it out, issues, milestones, it's this, 0.1. And I wrote this a while ago. Something playable. By version 0.10, we should have at least 1 gameplay loop that's actually fun and rewarding to play. So right now we have gameplay. I think it's fun, but we don't have a loop and it's not rewarding the player in any kind of way. So those are the 2 last things that need to be done in order for me to qualify this as a game. And we're almost there. We're almost there. So version 0.1.0 is probably just like a little arcade shooter sort of thing. And at that point I'll say, this is a full game, but I'm going to keep working on it, obviously, because it's not the game I'm setting out to make. But it was always the idea to break it into parts like this. So I've got these to do, apparently. This is quite a lot still to do. Gamifying the game, you know, like I say, we're almost there. Save game, I want you to have high scores for this iteration of the game, because I think that's the main way to reward the player, is to give you a high score. You know, for every enemy you take out, get a high score. They should increase in difficulty over time, and the more you take out, the higher your score, obviously. So I think that's the best way to gamify it at this point. We've got delta time. Yeah, I still need to do that. I still need to implement delta time for a lot of systems, go through everything and be like, okay, how do I decouple this from the frame rate? Because that's what adding delta time does. Exit to menu. Yeah, still know where to exit to the menu. Generate planets. That probably doesn't need to be here. Probably not. Not for 0.1. That's probably a lot later. Is there a reason I've kept this here? Long term, I would like to port Pixel Planet. Oh, I don't think I do. I think I want to do something else eventually. In the meantime, maybe look at Magrathea. Magrathea is another planet generator, by the way. It's a Rust-specific one, but I'm not using it. I'm just using sprite sheets at the moment. I do want to do planetary generation, but I don't think it's needed for this iteration of the game. I'm going to remove the milestone from that one, I think. So yeah, that should have no milestone. Bye-bye, generate planets. That'll come later. That'll be in like probably 0.2, unless the approach to versioning changes between minor versions. It might do. Settings menu, where you can adjust the sound, probably. Because right now there are 2 music tracks and there's the bullets in the game. I think you should be able to adjust your sound in a settings menu. That might make it into 0.1. Model the Sol system. That's almost all the way done. As you've seen, I've got the Sun, Mercury, Venus. They actually have accurate orbital values apart from their distance from the Sun. And there's a scaling factor involved in how quickly they orbit the Sun. Should talk more about scaling factor in a moment. But yeah, rescue, capture, salvage gameplay. That's a really good idea. I might do that by 0.1. It's either that or we have like a scoring system. Or both. Like this should increase your score too, and you should have a high score. Basically, I want you to, whenever you destroy an enemy ship, it should like drop something. It should drop cargo crates, or it should drop like enemy people that you can capture, who might otherwise, if you don't capture them, suffocate in space, which, you know, you're welcome to let happen. But yeah, the idea to be able to capture stuff that it drops and then return that to a planet and that's how you earn your points. That could be the way we do it. Game over screen or player death handling. Yeah. I haven't shown myself dying, have I? That is mostly done. We just need to, once we get there, have a game over screen appear. Reward the player. Like I say, yeah, we need to reward the player somehow. And refactor modules / organized code is something I really, really want to do, just to keep everything organized and make it so everything's easy to find anytime we're working on it. Shall we run it one last time, and I'll show you if we die. There is no game over screen. But there was the scaling factor I wanted to show. I'm not sure where that is exactly. What am I talking about scaling? It's gravity. It's dynamic orbit. We'll go to dynamic orbit and we'll talk about that in just a second. You don't need to see what happens when you die. At the moment, well, originally when I implemented the damage system and let the enemy damage the player, the game would crash when the player no longer existed, because a lot of systems, like the UI system, all of this stuff, like determining your speed, your position, all of it is based on the player. Time isn't, but your health is, your position is, your speed is. So without the player existing like that, we're gone. The game would crash because all these systems were like, oh no, can't find the player. This entity doesn't exist. Boom, game crashes. So I had to change those systems to handle that, and they now handle it more gracefully. So if they can't find the player, they just don't iterate. And so yeah, the game over state is just this at the moment. You're gone. You can actually still pause the game, unpause, and that does everything it's supposed to. Last known speed was 80 meters per second. That's still there, but the time is still going to tick on. We'll see 8:01. This is real time, so it's a real slog at the moment. There it is. Yeah, near the sun, last known position, and 0 HP. As I say, the game used to crash when the player was destroyed, but that was just because the systems were set up to expect the player to exist. Once they were decoupled, no longer is that a problem. But dynamic orbit, yeah. So the way this works, we have the player and the enemy ships being pulled towards celestial bodies, like the sun and the planets. And I actually have accurate... close others, please. Take me to planetary system, if you could, and show me star. Show me the sun, please. There we go, Sol. Yeah, the mass of the sun. This is an accurate mass for the sun. 1.989 times 10 to the power of 30. That is a massive number and is the actual mass of the sun. Which is why I need to do this. So for the gravitation on the affecting the ships, I just apply an impulse. It should probably be a force, and I'll probably change this at some point. But I just apply a basic impulse to the physics system body of the ship itself. As I say, it's got a physics system, it's got a collider, it's got rigid body installed. So I'm just using the physics system to do this. I apply the impulse to the ship, which is position minus ship translation dot normalize. Basically, yeah, get the 1-1 value of whatever direction it is, and then multiply that by the force we want to apply. So that's the sun's mass, which is way too big. If we got rid of this bit here, like all of this, if we just said mass, and like basically got rid of all that, you'd go towards the sun so quickly, you'd be flung off into infinity. Your speed would become not a number because it's too big. So we reduce it by this. It's basically the 7th root. We're raising it to the power of 1/7, which is the same as saying the 7th root. And this was not calculated. This was just guesswork. I tried a cube root originally, but like it was still way too strong. I tried 4th root, 5th, I think. I went up to 8th root at some point. I felt like the sun felt too weak at that point, and all the planets felt a little bit too weak at that point. It was the 7th root where the Earth's mass felt the most like it used to when this wasn't calculated like this. It was just a static value, and it was the same for all planets and all stars. Yeah, the 7th root is what felt most right, and in fact that was still too strong for the sun. It's close. I think the value for the sun comes to just over 9,000, but less than 10,000. But it's no, I think it's a bit over 10,000, but it's not that much over 10,000. But it is still too strong for your player ship thrust to escape. These numbers will be changed eventually and balanced, but like it was all guesswork is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you know what you're doing, sometimes you just like trial and error, guessworking, just throwing bullshit at the screen until you have something that feels right, and that's what this is. Because I don't know what it means to to get the 7th root of it. I don't know, but we're getting the 7th root of every massive body, and that's how gravity is applied to the ship. And if it's over 9,000, then we limit it to 9,000, so it's still escapable. So the gravity on the sun right now is 9,000 because that is over that value, which does mean that for black holes they're going to have 9,000 as well, which is not right. They should be stronger. But as I say, all going to change eventually, and that is a devlog. I think that's the end. What I need to work on now is we've got, various systems in place. We've got combat. So the thing I need to work on is how to reward the player and how to turn that into a gameplay loop where enemies keep spawning until there's either a victory condition or there's a game over condition, don't I? But I think we're most of the way there. Very happy with how this has turned out. As you can see, the sprites have all changed. Oh, that's the point. I didn't even mention the sprites. They have changed. Maybe as the last thing I'll show you. This feels so good right now. Like, I know I made it, but I'm enjoying myself, even though, yeah, that happens. Okay, so yeah, that's a third thing I think needs to be done before this is a game, is enemy behavior needs to be a bit more advanced. But there is this great coincidence where the gravity of, like, the sun does make them feel a little bit more dynamic. But that sun gravity is so strong. Anyway, yeah. The one last thing before we do go. What's it called now? It's it is a Kenney thing, yeah. Shipmaker? Was it a shipmaker? No. You know what? Just go. Oh, fuck. It's Kenvector, man. Kenney. Just go to Kenney. Ooh, new design on the site. Okay. It's a tool, isn't it? Sorry, tool. Ship mixer. So the new ships are using this mixer. I really do want to keep with a pixel art style because I think it's gonna be the best way to scale the art from, like, this scale, ship scale, and planet scale, down to, like, tile scale, world scale, where you're wandering around the world, or even the interior of your ship. So you can imagine, like, each individual pixel of this design becoming a 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 tile within a walkable space on board the ship. And that'd be what? 1, 2, 3, 4, like roughly 4 across at this point. A 4 by 4 or a 4 by 6 room in that area there. That's not a massive room to be able to explore, but you can imagine a pixel equaling a tile as you zoom in, and that's why I'm going for more of a pixel art style. Ship mixer, also a great utility, by the way. Like, Kenney's assets, wonderful stuff. I was using, you saw it previously, I was using the spaceship from Space Shooter Redux pack. It was one of these ones up here. I think it was, yeah, it was that ship, which served as a placeholder for a good while. But I'm loving the more pixelized style that we're going for now and in the future, I think. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this devlog. I think I just have to end it now. Might end it right there. Might end it right here. Ta-ra.